In this video, I'll show you some of the new features of Nettle that you'll be using this semester in our reading of the life of Milarepa. First of all, each chapter or each weekly unit will begin with a grammar preview video. So this is a video of me explaining some of the new grammar that you'll see in the week's lesson, and giving you other tips for reading. The second lecture video is called Sentence Building. In this exercise, we'll start with a small sentence that summarizes the entire week's chapter, and then we'll add on to that sentence, making it eventually very long, many lines long, with clauses that modify the original sentence and add more detail. And the point of this is to show you how Tibetan sentences are built and how clauses can be deciphered as individual units within very long sentences. Third, we have the reading and translation section, where much of your homework will be done. So this is the entire text of the chapter for a given unit, for a given week. And your job here is to read along in the Tibetan with the English as your guide, to decipher the Tibetan that has English provided, so that you know when in the Tibetan a blank spot in the English occurs, and you can translate that into your own English translation. So you'll enter your translation here, and you'll save your changes. You can come back to your work, assuming you've logged in, which you should do. You can come back to your work as often as you need to until you've come up with what you would like to be your final translation for the week. When you are done and you want to hand in your translation, you'll click on this little blue button right here, and you can export your reading and translation into one of two different formats. And then as a text file, you can copy that into Word if you want to, or you can just send it to me as a text file as it is. So this text is an abridgment of the original text, meaning that no new modern Tibetan has been added. This is the original classical Tibetan text, the biography of Milarepa. But some of it it's been shortened for the use in our class. So it's actually a very long text, and it's also quite a hard text. So you will find this difficult. You will use the English as a guide to help you figure out how to break up these sentences, but you also have a few hints here that should be helpful. So some of the nouns, not all of the nouns, but some of the nouns will be highlighted if you click on this noun button. This will help you decipher some of the sentences more easily. And some of the verbs, both final verbs and verbals, will be highlighted if you click on this button. So, for example, here's a final verb, shuk. Here's that same verb, shuk, but turned into a verbal. So it's a verb with respect to everything that comes before it, but it becomes a noun with respect to everything that comes after it, right? That's how verbal nouns work. But we call it a verb because we want you to understand that it should be looked at as a verb for things that come before it. So one other button here is the notes button. So in some cases, as is true for all old texts or new texts too, there are spelling mistakes sometimes. So those kinds of things will be highlighted in the notes section. And there sometimes are proverbs, this is a proverb, or other kinds of colloquialisms or regional expressions that you will not find in a dictionary. And so I'll highlight some of those as notes for you. So how will you go about your translation? You'll have to figure out what system works best for you. For those of you who have Munlam installed on your computer, you may be able to click on any word and look it up in the Munlam dictionary right on your computer. I don't have Munlam here installed, so I won't demonstrate that for you, but if you highlight something and click on it, you'll get a definition through Munlam if you have that installed. If you don't have Munlam installed, you can use some of the many online dictionaries that are available. In that case, you might copy a word and paste it, here it's already been done, into the online dictionary and get your definitions that way. You will sometimes have to use more than one online dictionary. For some words that are more difficult to find or that have a lot of different meanings. And through practice, you'll get better at that. In a few weeks, we'll talk about paper dictionaries and the importance of learning to use a paper dictionary, especially as you become a more advanced reader of Tibetan. But for now, I think it will be easiest for you to use one of the several online dictionaries that you can find. As for how you'll do this, practically speaking, you might have two windows open on your computer if you have a large screen and have a dictionary on one side and your text on the other side. Some of you might also want to print out the Tibetan and the English and work on paper. It can be really helpful to write on your text, especially at the beginning. You'll be able to then put boxes around words, make little commas or other kinds of notations in your text to break up these long sentences. And I would highly recommend that if you're having trouble. It really makes a big difference to be able to write on your text. If you're doing it that way, then you could still use an online dictionary by copying, having your computer open and using this cut and paste method, and you can still type in your translation here. I would add that this translation into English has been done in as literal a way as possible to help you read, to help you match up the English to the Tibetan. It's not always a very elegant translation, so as a result. And so if you would like to create your own translation that's somewhat different than this English, then by all means, please do that. By the end of the semester, you'll have a complete translation of the whole text, which will be quite an achievement. So that's the reading and translation section. Next, each week we'll have a traditional Tibetan grammar verse, and we'll be adding audio to these verses so that you can listen to the musicality of the verse itself and then memorize it as an aid to your own learning of Tibetan grammar. These verses are studied and memorized by Tibetan scholars and often by Tibetan children, and it's a good way to remember different points of grammar. Then we'll have sequencing practice, which you're familiar with from last semester. We'll have reading aloud again, which you will be able to use to practice your pronunciation, and I encourage you to do this weekly to improve your pronunciation. And in some cases this semester I'll be asking you to upload an audio file of yourself reading aloud as your homework. And then finally, most weeks we'll have another video lecture on some topic that's related to the week's lesson. So that's how this semester will work. That's each week will be similar in structure, but obviously with different content, learning new skills, and I'll look forward to working with you this semester, and I'm excited to see how much new Tibetan you can learn.